When Christine Whitmore accused me of sabotaging community property, she thought she had me cornered. What she didn't know was that I'd been recording every HOA meeting for 2 years, and her voice was on every single illegal vote. My name is Jake Sullivan, and I'm a forensic accountant who just wanted to tear down the pool that was bankrupting my HOA fees. But when Christine, our HOA president, called the cops claiming I was destroying shared infrastructure, she didn't realize she'd just challenged someone who audits financial fraud for a living. Because while she was focused on my pool, I was already 3 months deep into investigating where our HOA's missing $847,000 had gone, and every trail led straight back to her family's construction company. We've all wondered where our HOA fees actually go, right? Those endless maintenance assessments and emergency repairs that somehow never seem to improve anything. As this unfolds, you'll probably start recognizing some familiar patterns from your own community drama. What happened next will make you want to audit your own HOA's books. 18 months ago, my wife Lisa lost her battle with cancer. The pool in our backyard had been her dream project, something we'd saved for 3 years to build. She'd spent her final summer floating on an inflatable unicorn with our 12-year-old twins, Mason and Tyler, teaching them to do underwater handstands and hosting elaborate poolside tea parties with stuffed animals. After the funeral, I couldn't bring myself to use the pool. It sat there like a monument to everything I'd lost, slowly turning green despite the automatic cleaning system. But it wasn't just the emotional weight that bothered me. The HOA's monthly pool maintenance fee had become a financial burden I could no longer justify. Our community's HOA fees had doubled over the past year. What started as $180 per month had ballooned to $360, with Christine Whitmore citing endless infrastructure improvements that never seemed to materialize. My pool alone was costing the community $400 per month in maintenance. Despite being used by exactly 0 people since Lisa's death, Christine had moved into our neighborhood 3 years ago. Shortly after, her husband Danny's construction business landed several large municipal contracts. She immediately positioned herself for HOA leadership, running on a platform of professional property management and cost efficiency. What struck me as odd, even then, was how she always had very specific contractors she preferred for every community project. The decision to fill in the pool wasn't easy, but it made financial sense. I pulled the proper permits from the city, hired a licensed demolition company, and started the teardown process on a Tuesday morning in March. The concrete was harder to break than I'd expected, but there was something therapeutic about the physical labor. Each swing of the sledgehammer felt like progress toward a different kind of life. That's when Christine's reaction caught me completely off guard. I was hauling chunks of concrete to the disposal container when I noticed her standing at my fence line, not with her usual tight smile, but with genuine panic in her eyes. She was taking photos of my work area and making notes on a legal pad, which seemed disproportionate to a simple pool removal. "Jake," she called out, her voice carrying that authority she'd perfected during board meetings. "I need to speak with you immediately." I set down my shovel and walked over, sweat-stained and confused. "What's up, Christine? This demolition needs to stop right now." Her voice was shaking slightly, which I'd never heard before. "You're destroying community infrastructure." I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "Christine, it's my pool, on my property. I have all the permits. Actually, Jake, that's where you're wrong." She pulled out a manila folder that looked suspiciously well prepared. "As of last month's emergency board meeting, your pool was designated as shared community amenity. You're currently in violation of HOA regulations and potentially criminal law." The statement was so absurd that I actually laughed. "Christine, I've read every HOA document for this community. There's no provision about shared pool access, and there definitely wasn't any meeting about my pool." Her confident expression faltered for just a moment before she recovered. "Not all board decisions require full community meetings. Jake, we followed proper emergency procedures for community benefit." That's when my professional instincts kicked in. As a forensic accountant, I'd spent 15 years investigating financial irregularities and document fraud. Something about Christine's claim felt wrong on multiple levels. When exactly did this vote happen? 2 weeks ago. Emergency session for infrastructure preservation. Funny thing, Christine, I record every HOA meeting for my personal records. When exactly did this vote happen? The color drained from her face. Like I said, emergency procedure. Don't always require community notification. 20 minutes later, Officer Bradley Reeves was standing in my driveway, looking as confused as I felt. Christine had called 911, reporting destruction of community infrastructure, which had triggered a response for potential property damage and neighbor disputes. Mr. Sullivan, Officer Reeves said, consulting his notepad. Mrs. Whitmore claims you're demolishing shared community property without authorization. Can you explain the situation? I showed him my permits, property deed, and the original HOA documents. Officer, this pool has been privately owned since I built it 5 years ago. There's no provision for community designation in our HOA bylaws. Christine stepped forward with her manila folder. Officer, here are the amended bylaws from our recent emergency board meeting. Jake's pool maintenance has been costing our community thousands monthly. The board voted to designate it as shared amenity to offset costs. Officer Reeves examined the documents, his frown deepening. Ma'am, these signatures look very similar. Are you certain all board members signed these amendments? Of course they did. I witnessed every signature personally. That evening, I called Amanda Torres, an HOA law specialist I'd worked with on several fraud cases. Amanda had 20 years of experience in community association law and a reputation for cutting through administrative nonsense. Jake, she said after I explained the situation, what you're describing sounds like systematic embezzlement disguised as emergency governance. No HOA can retroactively designate private property as community assets. That's not legally possible. But Christine has documents with board signatures. Document forgery is unfortunately common in HOA fraud cases. The bigger question is why she's so desperate to control your pool specifically. This sounds like cover for something much larger. Her words triggered a realization that made my stomach drop. For the past year, I'd been tracking our community's finances as part of my normal due diligence. The numbers had never quite added up, but I'd attributed discrepancies to poor record keeping. Now I wondered if my professional blind spot had been willful ignorance. I spent that night reviewing 3 years of HOA financial records with the same scrutiny I applied to corporate fraud investigations. What I found was staggering. Our community had paid $847,000 for infrastructure improvements that didn't exist, new playground equipment that was never installed, road resurfacing that never happened, landscaping projects that existed only on paper. 90% of these phantom contracts had been awarded to Whitmore Construction LLC. Every major expense had followed the same pattern. Christine would declare an emergency, call for immediate action, and recommend her preferred contractor. The work would be approved, paid for, and then either never completed or completed at a fraction of the billed cost. My pool's monthly maintenance contract was particularly egregious. We were paying $400 per month for services that should have cost $600. The difference was pure profit, flowing directly to companies controlled by Christine's husband. But the real smoking gun was in the meeting minutes. According to official records, and the board had voted on dozens of expenditures that I knew for certain had never been discussed in public meetings. Either they were holding secret sessions, which violated state transparency laws, or Christine was fabricating votes entirely. The next morning, I called Rebecca Chen, an investigative journalist who'd covered several municipal fraud cases I'd worked on. Rebecca had a talent for connecting financial irregularities to broader patterns of corruption. Jake, what you're describing fits a pattern I've been tracking citywide. Rebecca said, HOA embezzlement schemes targeting communities with high property values and inactive oversight. How long has Christine been in power? 3 years. She positioned herself as the financial responsibility candidate. Classic. They always do. Listen, I've been investigating construction fraud involving kickback schemes between HOA boards and family-owned contractors. Your case could be the missing piece that ties everything together. Rebecca's words crystallized something I'd been struggling to articulate. Christine's panic about my pool wasn't about community property or shared amenities. It was about eliminating the largest line item in her fraudulent budget. Without my pool's inflated maintenance costs, the HOA's financial picture would look dramatically different. Other homeowners might start asking questions about where their money was actually going. That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of fighting Christine's bogus community property claim, I would use my forensic accounting skills to expose the entire financial fraud operation she'd been running. My pool was just the tip of an iceberg that had been sinking our community for 3 years. I called the twins at school during their lunch break. Boys, I need to ask you something important. Do you remember Mom talking about wanting to help our neighbors? She always said communities should take care of each other. Mason replied, Well, I think I found a way to honor that. But it might mean some difficult conversations and investigations. Are you okay with Dad doing something that helps our neighbors? Even if it gets complicated? Tyler's voice was serious for a 12-year-old. If it's what Mom would have wanted, then we support you. Their words gave me the resolve I needed. Lisa had believed in protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Christine Whitmore had been systematically stealing from families who trusted her with their financial security. It was time to fight back using every tool in my professional arsenal. But as I began organizing my evidence that evening, I realized that exposing Christine would require more than just financial analysis. I would need to prove that her document forgery, her fabricated emergency meetings, and her phantom construction contracts were all part of a coordinated scheme. Most importantly, I would need to demonstrate that my pool had been targeted specifically because its removal would threaten her entire operation. The investigation I was about to undertake would either restore financial integrity to our community or destroy my reputation if Christine managed to discredit my findings. But looking at the memorial photos of Lisa that still decorated our living room, I knew there was really no choice at all. Christine Whitmore had picked a fight with the wrong forensic accountant, and she was about to learn that some financial mysteries are more dangerous to hide than to solve. The next morning, I activated every forensic tool in my professional arsenal. 3 computer monitors displayed spreadsheets, bank records, and contract databases as I began the most important audit of my career. What I discovered in the first 2 hours made my blood run cold. Christine hadn't just been skimming money. She'd been running a sophisticated embezzlement operation that would make corporate executives jealous. Every single emergency repair had been carefully orchestrated to maximize profit extraction while maintaining plausible deniability. The pattern was surgical in its precision. Christine would identify expensive maintenance issues during routine HOA business, declare emergency board authority, and approve contracts with Whitmore Construction before homeowners could review the expenses. The work would either be completed at a fraction of the build cost or never completed at all. Cross-referencing our community's expenses with comparable HOA communities revealed the true scope of the fraud. Our landscaping costs were 340% higher than similar neighborhoods. Our maintenance contracts exceeded industry standards by an average of 280%. Most damning of all, our reserve fund had been systematically drained to pay for phantom projects. But the smoking gun was in the signature analysis, using document authentication software I'd employed in federal fraud cases. I compared the board signatures on Christine's emergency approvals. Every single signature showed identical pressure patterns, pen angle variations, and microscopic tremor characteristics. Christine had been forging every board member's signature for 18 months. My analysis was interrupted by a frantic phone call from Bill Matthews, our HOA treasurer for the past 5 years. Jake, I just got a call from Christine demanding that I transfer $85 to an emergency infrastructure account. She says there's been a plumbing crisis that requires immediate contractor response. Bill, don't transfer anything. Meet me at my house in 30 minutes and bring every financial document you have access to. When Bill arrived, his face was pale with shock. Jake, I've been reviewing old expenses since your call yesterday. I think Christine's been lying to us about everything. Bill pulled out a stack of invoices that told a disturbing story. Look at this water damage repair from last winter. Christine told us it cost $45. Because of specialized equipment and emergency response fees. I called the contractor this morning to ask about warranty coverage. What did they say? They said they'd never worked on our property. The company name on the invoice doesn't exist. Christine created fake letterhead and billing statements for contractors that don't exist. The revelation was staggering. Christine hadn't just been inflating real contracts, She'd been creating entirely fictional work orders and billing the community for services that were never performed by companies that didn't exist. We spent the next 4 hours cross-referencing bank statements with actual work performed. The results were devastating. Our community had paid Whitmore Construction $340. Zero, for a new playground that cost $65. Zero to install. We'd been billed $120. Zero, for road resurfacing that was actually done by the city for free. The list went on and on. Bill, I said, documenting every fraudulent transaction. We need to call an emergency homeowner meeting. Not a board meeting. A full community assembly where Christine can't control the agenda. While Bill contacted neighbors, I made 2 crucial phone calls. First to Rebecca Chen, who agreed to attend the meeting with photographic evidence of Christine's fraud patterns in other communities. Second to the state HOA Oversight Division, where I filed a formal complaint with supporting financial documentation. The emergency meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at 7 p.m. in the community center. Word spread quickly through our neighborhood, and by 6:45 p.m., nearly every homeowner had arrived. The tension was palpable as Christine entered with a briefcase and Danny trailing behind her, looking uncomfortable. What I hadn't expected was the number of neighbors who approached me before the meeting started, each with their own story of financial hardship caused by Christine's fee increases. Tom Rodriguez, a single father, had been working double shifts to afford the fees. Sarah Kim showed me violation notices, including threats to put a lien on her house for being 3 days late with payment. The stories kept coming from families struggling with the inflated community expenses. I understand there are some questions about recent HOA expenses. Christine began, her voice maintaining its usual authority. I'm happy to address any concerns about our professional financial management. I stood up from the back of the room. Christine, let's start with the $340. Zero playground project. Can you explain why we paid Whitmore Construction $275? Zero more than the actual installation cost? Her confident expression flickered. Jake, these are complex infrastructure projects with multiple cost components. Materials, permits, site preparation. Actually, Christine, I have the itemized receipts from the playground manufacturer. Total project cost was $65. Ling, where did the additional $275? Zero go? The room erupted in murmurs as homeowners began calculating their own financial contributions to the phantom expenses. Christine's face flushed as she realized her usual deflection tactics weren't working. Furthermore, I continued, I've analyzed the board signatures on every emergency expenditure approval. Every signature shows identical biometric characteristics, suggesting they were all signed by the same person. Danny Whitmore suddenly stood up, his face red with anger. Christine, you told me those contracts were legitimately approved. You said the board had voted on everything. The room fell silent as Christine's own husband publicly contradicted her story. Danny, sit down. You don't understand the complexities of HOA governance. But Danny wasn't finished. No. Christine, I understand billing fraud when I see it. You've been using my company's name to steal from these people, and I won't be part of it anymore. That's when Rebecca Chen stood up and addressed the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Rebecca Chen from Channel 7 News. For the past 6 months, I've been investigating HOA embezzlement schemes across the metro area. What Mr. Sullivan has documented here matches a pattern we've traced through 12 different communities, all involving forged board approvals and inflated construction contracts. Rebecca opened her laptop and projected financial data onto the community center's screen. Maple Ridge Estates. Stohlen. 430. Ling. Sunset Hills Community. Embezzled $620. Ling. Brookstone Village. Defrauded of $380. Ling. The pattern is identical in every case. A charismatic HOA president. A family construction business. And forged emergency approvals for inflated contracts. The room gasped as Rebecca displayed side-by-side photos of construction projects across different communities. These playground installations were billed at prices ranging from $280, zero to $450. Ling, The actual cost for each project was between $65, $0 and $85. Ling. The Whitmore Construction Company was involved in 9 of these 12 cases. Christine's face went ashen as she realized the scope of Rebecca's investigation extended far beyond our community. This is a coordinated media attack designed to destroy small business owners who've worked hard to improve community infrastructure. But Rebecca wasn't finished. Mrs. Whitmore, we have bank records showing systematic transfers from multiple HOA accounts to shell companies controlled by you and your husband. The total amount across all communities exceeds $2, $3 million in fraudulent contracts. Christine's composure completely cracked. This is a coordinated attack on my reputation. Jake is retaliating because I prevented him from destroying community property. I pulled out my phone and played the recorded audio from our previous HOA meetings. Christine, let's listen to your voice from every board meeting for the past 2 years. Now let's compare it to your claim that emergency votes were conducted without community notification. The recordings were damning. Not once in 24 months had Christine mentioned emergency expenditures, shared pool designations, or community property modifications. Every single claim she'd made about board votes was fabricated. Mrs. Henderson, an elderly widow on a fixed income, stood up with tears in her eyes. Christine, I've been struggling to pay these increased fees. My husband's medical bills already stretched our budget. And you've been stealing from us? Other voices joined in as the financial impact became personal. Young families who'd delayed vacations to afford HOA increases, retirees who'd considered selling their homes because of unsustainable fees, single parents who'd taken second jobs to cover Christine's fictional expenses. Christine made one final desperate attempt to regain control. All of these accusations are based on Jake's personal vendetta. He's angry about the pool designation and he's trying to destroy our community's financial stability. That's when Officer Bradley Reeves entered the community center, followed by 2 detectives from the State Financial Crimes Unit. Mrs. Whitmore, Detective Sarah Mills announced, "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of embezzlement, document forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud." The silence that followed was deafening. Christine's face went through several shades of pale as she realized her 3-year scheme was collapsing in real time. "This is harassment," she whispered, but her voice lacked any remaining authority. Detective Mills consulted her notes. Mrs. Whitmore, our investigation shows systematic embezzlement totaling $847 from this community alone. We've also identified similar patterns in 4 other HOA communities where you and your husband operated. Danny Whitmore approached the detectives with his hands raised. "Officers, I want to cooperate fully. I had no idea my wife was forging board approvals. I thought all these contracts were legitimate." Detective Mills turned to Danny with interest. "Mr. Whitmore, we'll need detailed statements about every contract your company completed for HOA communities. Our forensic accountants will need to verify actual work performed versus billed amounts." "There's something else," Danny said, his voice breaking. "Christine has been moving money through offshore accounts. She opened business accounts in the Cayman Islands last month. I found the paperwork in her office last week." The revelation sent another shock through the room. Christine's embezzlement wasn't just local fraud. It was international money laundering designed to hide stolen funds beyond the reach of state authorities. Detective Mills radioed for additional support. "We're going to need the FBI Financial Crimes Task Force." This case just became federal. As they read Christine her rights, she looked at me with undisguised hatred. "You've destroyed everything we built here. Jake, this community was thriving under my leadership." "Actually, Christine," I replied quietly, "this community was dying under your theft. We're finally going to start thriving." The legal proceedings moved remarkably quickly. Christine's detailed financial records, ironically kept to track her embezzlement profits, provided prosecutors with overwhelming evidence of systematic fraud. The state recovered $680 in assets, including Christine's house, vehicles, and business accounts. The FBI's investigation into the offshore accounts yielded an additional $2 million in recovered funds, which was distributed among the 12 affected communities. Our neighborhood received 300 afura owe zero in restitution, enough to fund legitimate infrastructure improvements for the next decade. Christine's trial became a landmark case for HOA fraud prosecution. She was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $8 million in restitution. The judge, during sentencing, noted that Christine's abuse of community trust represented one of the most systematic and callous fraud schemes the court had seen. Danny Whitmore received probation in exchange for his cooperation and agreement to refund overcharged contract amounts. His testimony revealed that Christine had been directing him to inflate bills for months, claiming the extra money was for administrative overhead and HOA management fees. I should have asked more questions, Danny told the court during his testimony. When your wife tells you the HOA board approved premium pricing for community prestige, you want to believe her? I was stupid, but I wasn't criminal. The ripple effects extended beyond our community. The FBI task force identified 17 additional HOA communities where similar fraud patterns had occurred. Christine's scheme had stolen over $2 million from working families across 3 states. 6 weeks later, I was standing in my backyard with Mason and Tyler, designing the memorial garden where our pool used to be. The concrete was gone, replaced by rich soil where we'd plant Lisa's favorite flowers. The twins had chosen sunflowers because, as Tyler explained, Mom always said they followed the light. The garden design had evolved into something more meaningful than I'd originally planned. We created a reading nook with a stone bench where Lisa used to sit with her morning coffee, a butterfly garden with plants that would attract the monarchs she'd love to photograph, and in the center, a small fountain that recycled water through native plants. Representing the sustainable community values she'd always championed, Mason had researched plants that would bloom in sequence, ensuring color throughout the growing season. Dad, Mom would want the garden to help other people too. Can we plant herbs that neighbors can use for cooking? The community transformation was remarkable. Our new HOA board, elected in an emergency vote, had implemented transparent financial reporting and competitive contractor bidding. Monthly fees dropped back to $180. And for the first time in 3 years, homeowners could see exactly where every dollar was being spent. More importantly, the crisis had brought neighbors together in ways that hadn't happened since the community was first built. Tom Rodriguez organized monthly family barbecues. Sarah Kim started a neighborhood emergency fund for families facing medical crises. Margaret Wells began teaching financial literacy classes for young homeowners. Mrs. Henderson approached us as we worked in the garden. Jake, I wanted to thank you. The restitution money covered my husband's final medical bills. You gave us our dignity back. Similar conversations happened throughout the neighborhood. Young families could afford family vacations again. Retirees felt secure in their homes. The community that Christine had been slowly bankrupting was financially healthy for the first time in years. Rebecca's investigative series on HOA fraud sparked statewide legislation requiring independent audits and board signature verification. My forensic methods became standard training for financial oversight investigators. The impact reached far beyond our small community. The Sullivan method, as it became known in forensic accounting circles, combined traditional financial analysis with community psychology and document authentication technology. Law enforcement agencies across the country began implementing similar protocols for investigating organized fraud in community associations. 6 months after Christine's conviction, I received an invitation to speak at the National Association of Forensic Accountants annual conference. My presentation, titled Community Trust and Financial Betrayal, Lessons from the Field, became the foundation for new investigative training programs. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The 12 communities affected by Christine's schemes pooled resources to establish the Lisa Sullivan Community Protection Fund, providing free forensic accounting services to HOA communities that suspect financial irregularities but lack resources to investigate. Your wife's values about protecting vulnerable people have created something that will help families for generations. Rebecca told me during the fund's launch ceremony, Lisa's legacy isn't just in your memorial garden. It's in every community that will be protected because you chose to fight back. But the real victory was simpler than systemic change. Mason and Tyler were learning that protecting people sometimes requires fighting for them. Lisa's values about community care had survived her death and grown into something that protected dozens of families. "Dad," Mason said as we planted the last row of sunflowers, "do you think Mom would be proud of what we did?" I looked at the memorial garden taking shape, at our neighbors working together again, at the twins who understood that integrity sometimes demands difficult choices. I think she'd be proud that we protected our community, just like she always taught us to do. Tyler knelt beside the newly planted herb section, carefully watering the basil and oregano that would soon provide fresh ingredients for neighborhood cooking. Mrs. Henderson said she's going to make her famous spaghetti sauce with these herbs and invite everyone over for dinner. The garden had become more than a memorial. It was becoming a gathering place where community healing could take root alongside Lisa's favorite plants. Neighbors stopped by daily, some to help with planting, others just to sit on the stone bench and share stories about their own recovery from Christine's financial abuse. "You know what the best part is?" Mason asked, adjusting the small fence around the butterfly plants. "Mom always said gardens grow better when people take care of them together. And now our whole neighborhood is like that. Sometimes when someone tries to stop you from tearing something down, it's because they're afraid of what you might find underneath. And sometimes, the best way to honor someone's memory isn't by preserving what they built, but by protecting the community they loved." The sunflowers were already reaching toward the light, just like Lisa always said they would.